Good.
Oh, thank you. I meant it. I didn't.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
Oh,
very
my.
awesome. So what's Shavuos cheesecake?
No, I don't have cheesecake in this house. Brian's vegan. We have nothing.
We can have a vegan one.
Yeah. All right. Listen, if you want to make it, you just go ahead, Valerie. I am not doing all those nuts and all that business. No, we'll think about it.
You'll think of something. You'll come up with something.
Will I? Thanks.
I'm sure you will.
Oh, okay. If you say so. No, I love Shavuos. I've been in shul for that as well. Oh, it's all such good fun. And the children are looking forward to Lag BaOmer for this week. So that's exciting for them. We'll be going out on outings. Really nice.
Yeah.
It's nice to have the children for Lag BaOmer. It's such fun and they look forward to it. And it's lovely. I like everything that happens. Most things.
Beautiful.
But even for an old biddy, I do get excited sometimes.
Why not?
Yeah, Yiddishkeit excites me because there's so much to learn. Actually, there's so much I've got to learn.
So much to live for, absolutely. We're going to jump in. We're going to get started.
Yeah.
Especially because just say Yiddishkeit's full of excitement.
Yes.
And there's a lot to talk about. With tonight, we're just coming to the top. Actually, it's just here now, but we're just completing Pesach Sheni. And Pesach Sheni in recent history was made into one of the most Hasidic regular days. Because the message of Pesach Sheni, really starting from a long time ago, but the Frierdiker Rebbe made a massive deal out of Pesach Sheni. And perhaps you could say that the Rebbe, his son-in-law, took it to the next level in the name of his father-in-law. In which the Frierdiker Rebbe said, Pesach Sheni teaches us not just that the people who complained, who asked, who raised the query, received a second chance, but as the Rebbe teaches us very often, the fact that you can get a second chance is such an innovation. It's so creative. When I've missed the opportunity with no one else to blame but myself, there doesn't make sense I should have a second chance. And if there is a second chance, it's not just a second chance, it's an idea that you can always make up. It's never too late. Because if there's a 1 second chance and the first second chance can work, the creation of a second chance is so enormous. It can only be because Hashem allows us, as long as we're alive, to continue trying. And therefore, second chance doesn't just mean 1 and 2. It means as long as we're still alive, we can always make up for it. And then the Rebbe would sometimes go on and say that not only if we're still alive, we can make up for people who are no longer with us. We can help them make up for things that they missed out. Because Hashem's kindness in his creation is that as long as we are around, we can go and not only not lose out, but bring things back to the way they should have been in the best possible way. And Pesach Sheni teaches us that. What's Pesach Sheni? There was our first Pesach. It was the highlight of Pesach was to bring the carbon Pesach. And the whole family and everybody, the Chabura would get together and eat a carbon Pesach. And if a person missed out on that, either because it was not their fault, but even if it was their fault, even if they intentionally they weren't in the area, then they can bring a Pesach Sheni. They can go and get a second chance. A month later, they bring the second carbon and they have a mitzvah just like anything else. And then, of course, the Rebbe would take it to the next level and say, don't think that we're getting second class seconds. No, second chance means you can make up for everything, including all the greatness that could have been achieved. It's hard work. It doesn't come by itself. You've got to want, you've got to try, you've got to push. But when I do, and if I can encourage myself to do so, it's never too late. The words in Yiddish is, it's never too late. It's never written off. And of course, we have to say that to ourselves so often and remind ourselves over and over. We shouldn't write ourselves off. Oh, I'm only this. Oh, I'm only that. And once we are comfortable encouraging ourselves to step up, we can do the same for those around us. And even those further afield, we can remind ourselves that nobody's written off. We can't help everybody, but we can always have encouraging things to say to everybody, because it's not just words, it's actually how it is. It's Pesach Sheni. Pesach Sheni teaches us that there is a second chance. And the living Torah that was going around, the clip that they send around each week. So they had Rabbi Lau describing how he was actually at a Farbrengen by the Rebbe. And he describes how the Rebbe spoke for 3 or 4 hours without notes. And he just went on and on, elaborating on this idea and how powerful it is. At the core of it, it teaches us teshuvah, that I did something wrong and I was able to make amends. But it's not only teshuvah in the sense that, you don't get punishment. It's teshuvah in the sense that we reconnect with Hashem. And that's enormous. It's so encouraging to know that. Enlightening. It's so worthwhile waking up in the morning when I know that Pesach Sheni exists. It's part of the plan. Because today's a new day. Today's the opportunity. And today's the first day of the rest of our life. Today's the first day of the rest of our life. How amazing. How great of potential it is. So that's one big highlight of this week. It's Pesach Sheni was today. And we're moving with the Pesach Sheni message forward, onwards towards doing more good things. Towards bringing Mashiach, living a Mashiach reality. So that's one highlight. And then, of course, we have another highlight coming up. And that's the end of this week on Friday. Thursday night Friday will be the big highlight of Lag BaOmer. And again, another major Hasidic day. In recent history, it's become clearer and clearer of just how powerful Lag BaOmer is. Lag BaOmer, in its basic sense, is pretty much a Kabbalistic day. It's brought down in the Halakhas, it is. And it's brought down in Gemara because Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim, who passed away for 24,000 greatest Rabbanim of all of Yiddishkeit, the whole Klal Yisrael lost such an enormous number to a pandemic, the equivalent of. But it was the pandemic that hit the Rosh Yeshivas. It hit all the Talmidei Chachamim. And when it was over, Rabbi Akiva had every reason to throw in the towel and say, you know what? Everything he'd built up, his thousands of Talmidim, gone, finished. But of course, Rabbi Akiva would never say that. That's how he started in the first place. He was 40 years old before he learned to read. 40 years old, he never gave up. His wife encouraged him. But when he's lost his entire followership, he started again. And from those Talmidim, the 5 famous Talmidim that he had, one of them was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who is the author of the Zohar, and he was a giant in Halacha, in Gemara, and he was a giant in Kabbalah, Nister, and he wrote the Zohar. And he famously asked that on this day of his passing, they should make it into a day of celebration. And this is the celebration of Lag BaOmer that's coming up this Thursday night, Friday, to celebrate the life, the depth of Yiddishkeit that we live just by being alive, just by doing one more good thing and one more good thing. This excitement of Lag BaOmer is so powerful. For most people, we light a candle on the day of the yahrzeit. For Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we light a bonfire. A bonfire we light for his yahrzeit, for his Yom HaHilula. And this is Lag BaOmer coming up our way. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was the person who was like Shabbos in this world. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, in his end of his life, made changes and used all his greatness to be able to have another year do one more good thing. The famous story when he came out of the cave, the first time, the second time, he went around seeing how can we help another person and how can we help another year be able to do one more right thing. And that's us. We do one more right thing and another right thing. And we remind ourselves that this is Pesach Sheni. This is Lag BaOmer. It's the same sort of idea of how we have every little thing that we do is powerful and it works. It really does. I mean, instead of beating ourselves up, how come this and how come that, we think of what's the next right thing to do and how we're going to live even better going forward. And we're going to make up for those things that were missed. But because today's a special day. So there's 2 highlights, 2 major dates on this calendar, on this week's calendar, and each one of them are so full of energy. So we're going to look at the Parsha and say, with this sort of energy, what can we take as a life message? Of course, we're going to learn the Sikha to teach us that. But which part of the Parsha can we take this year, this week, to be able to take us full of energy to be able to live a Geula lifestyle? So we're going to start off with what's going on in this week's Parsha. Just do this. you can see what I'm got on the screen. There we go. Yeah. So we're gonna start off with the summary of the parsha, and from there we're gonna go to one area of the parsha that we'll use as a life message. Let's change this to here. There we go. That's better. Okay. So what's this week's parsha? This week's parsha is Parshah's Emor. There's a new feature on the materials that they provide. Once again, Shakayach to Rabbi Michal and Cohen for sponsoring the material. In the material they prepared, they have the question of the week is Shabbos, and they have rest. But they have now a new feature. They have the overview on the PowerPoint slide. So what's in this week's parsha? You can read it if you prefer to read. But I'm going to just do it in my own words. We have, in the opening of the parsha, is the Halakhas of Koyanim. It's almost like the Shulchan Aruch for the Koyanim. There are a number of different halachas, starting off with the Koyanim's halach of not becoming tamei. They can't expose themselves to impurity, to a person who's passed away, to go to a levaya, to go to a besolam. They can't go, with the exception of immediate family. And the Torah lists the 7 different categories of immediate family: a father, a mother, a brother, a sister who's not married, a spouse, and a son or a daughter. But we also have the halachas who a kohen may and may not marry. A kohen is only allowed to marry someone who's not a divorcee, someone who has a clean history, if you like, no promiscuous past. And a kohen gadol has to marry someone who's never been married before. The kohen also can't have a mum in order to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. And then the Torah goes from there to say, well, actually, in the Beis HaMikdash, you can't bring a carbon that has a mum, has a blemish, is deformed. Once we're talking about the animals, we go on to still talk about the different restrictions of which animals can and cannot be brought in the Beis HaMikdash on the Mizbech, and that includes it has to be at least a year old. Sorry, 7 days old, not a year old. The year old is for some of the Kabbanas. At least 7 days old, and we can't have 2 animals, a mother and a kid of the same animal, so you can't slaughter both of them on the same day. And it becomes an interesting discussion in halacha. If 2 people one owns the mother and one owns the offspring of that same animal, who gets to shech the animal on one day and who has to postpone it? And if one is shechted, do they have to let the other one know? But that's an interesting halacha, which the Torah tells us you cannot have 2 animals, a mother and a child, shechted on the same day. Second part of Parshah's Emor is the part of Parshah's Emor that the Balei Korah, the readers of the Torah, love, because it's that parsha that they get used to. Whenever it's a Yom Tov, generally you have a reading, a laning from Parshah's Emor, because in Parshah's Emor we have the going through all the Yomim Tovim of the calendar, starting with Shabbos, and then on to Pesach, and then we have the Karban Omer, and we have Shavuos, and then we have Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, and of course Shmini Atzeres, and they have all the different karbanos and mitzvahs that are specific to those days. At the end of the parasha, we learn about lighting the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash. We learn about the lechem apanim, the showbread that was placed weekly in the Beis HaMikdash in Hashem's home. And at the end of the parasha, we have a sad story of how one of the people, a Jewish person who was cursing Hashem's name, and the punishment was there for him. And then we also have what is the punishment in general for someone who murders, for someone who injures a fellow human being, and for someone who destroys the property of someone else. Is that a question coming up? Please feel free to ask if you do have a question. No? Okay. So these are the three sets of halachas at the end of the parasha. Each one of them obviously generates a whole bunch of sections in the Gemara and in the Shulchan Aruch. What is considered murder? When is it okay? When is murder different than killing and injuring a person? When is a person liable or not liable? How much do you have to pay? How do you measure how much to pay? And of course, when it comes to destroying property, how much compensation and how it works, which liabilities and which things are responsible, liable to be included into the payment the person has. So Parshah's Emor is quite a broad parasha, starting off with the Kohanim, onto the Yomim Tovim, and onto certain halakhas of civil law, if you like. But we're going to pick one area today, and as we start off by saying, we're looking at the halakhas of Shabbos, the mitzvah of keeping Shabbos, and that's going to be our angle on which the Sikha of this, the Sikha project, Chelik Yud Zayin, focuses on for this week's lesson. So let's put the question on the screen, and we're going to ask ourselves the following question: what is Shabbos really all about? I'm going to ask you to answer this question, if you don't mind. If you had a non-Jewish neighbor who asks you, not a malicious question, just want to know, what is Shabbos really about? And you have to tell them the shortest answer that will explain to them, with no Jewish background at all, what is Shabbos about? What does Shabbos mean to you, or what does Shabbos mean in general? Help me out. Give me some answers, please.
You could say that it's a religious day when we rest.
Good. So it's a religious day, then we rest. I like that answer. Does anyone want to add to that? Have a different answer to that?
It's a time to connect with spirituality.
Great. So it's a time to connect with spirituality. We like where we're going. Anyone else want to add to that? Agreed with that?
It's quite a
Family
hard
time.
question.
Go again?
Family time.
Family time, very important. So we have a day of rest and we have a day of spirituality. I think one without the other wouldn't fully explain it. If someone says it's a day of rest, okay, well, you had a rest last week, you'll have a rest next week. This week, do you mind just doing this, that, and the other? And that's where the religious, spiritual connecting side comes in. So actually, it's not a day of rest because we're tired. It's not a day of rest because we need a day out. It's a day of rest, which is a religious day of rest in which we have to ritually take a rest. We're going to ask a couple of questions. We're going to ask a couple of questions, which is, number one, does Shabbos actually mean a day of rest? If you think about it, how much of your Shabbos is really restful? Or if we ask the question the other way around, if you had to design your own day of rest, how similar would it look to Shabbos? Is there anything about Shabbos that's not restful?
Not really.
Not really? Well,
It depends if you have a family at home or if there's just a few of you, or, you know, what Shabbos is like. I mean, for the last 14 months, it really is a very restful, peaceful day because it's without children, without family sometimes. So it's different.
correct.
It's different now.
But think of cooking, preparing your food. Okay, you do a lot of the work before Shabbos, and Shabbos you don't have much work. But if you live not nearby shul, and instead of having to jump into your car and drive over to shul, you got to walk, and it takes you 20, 25 minutes to get there. That could be a little bit the opposite of rest, although it might be a pleasant walk. What if it's raining? But also, what we do on Shabbos, besides for resting, we spend time in shul, which might be pleasant, but it's not a rest. It's not a time we do nothing. Having a lavish meal is enjoyable, but it's not sitting back and doing less. It might be a pleasure, but is that what we call a rest? I mean, usually you think of a rest, you think you sit on the couch, you put your feet up, you have a lie-in. You might do that as well in Shabbos, but it seems like Shabbos is not just restful. And the truth is that when you say, as someone mentioned, when we have children, and we have a big family, and we're having family time, often it's much harder or much more intense during Shabbos than it's not Shabbos.
Yeah.
So there is an angle there that although we call it a day of rest, it isn't only or isn't purely really a day of rest. That's one question. Here's the other question. When did Shabbos become a day of rest? What about Shabbos? Why is Shabbos the day of rest? We say it in Kiddush. Why do we rest on Shabbos?
Because Hashem rested on Shabbos.
Oh, Hashem rested on Shabbos. Kivoy Shabbos came and come Hashem rested, so he wants us to rest. And here's the question. Why did Hashem rest? Was Hashem tired? Was Hashem worn out from all the 6 days of hard work of creation? You better hope the answer is no. If Hashem gets tired from working hard, What sort of Eibishter is that? Of course, we don't mean literally that Hashem was tired and needed a rest. Why did Hashem choose to rest and therefore make us rest? Second question. So first question is, what is Shabbos really? Is it really a day of rest? Number two, why did Hashem rest? How did Shabbos become a day of rest? Because Hashem rested. Why was Hashem resting? Number three, we know Shabbos, soy menucha. Menucha means rest. Shabbos, kodesh. So Shabbos is a day of rest, but Shabbos is also a day of kodesh. How do you say kodesh in English? Kodesh?
Holy.
Holy? And if you had to use an English word that was not holy and you couldn't use the word kodesh, what other word could you use to describe holy?
Sacramental. No, maybe not.
Okay. I like that. That's like the thesaurus. Yeah, go on. I was going to suggest holiness would mean more godly, more connected to Hashem. That's what holiness means. Because it doesn't just mean abstract. Because sometimes the abstract isn't holy. Sometimes the tangible is very holy, like a Sefer Torah. But holiness means it expresses Hashem more. So Shabbos is a day of holiness. And here's the question. When you think of the holiest day in the year, which day comes to mind?
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur. Okay, I would agree. Now, I'm asking you, does the day of rest and Yom Kippur sound the same? No. Yom Kippur doesn't sound like a day of rest, although it does say Shabbos, Shabbosim. The question we're asking is, does it make sense? Does it tie in together to have the same day to be a day of rest and relaxing and also call it the day of holiness? It seems like holiness is almost the opposite of rest. A day that's closer to Hashem is more intense, not less intense, not more restful. You got to work hard. You got to keep up the game. And here's the third question is, if we're calling it a day of rest, how does that fit in with a day of holiness? Holiness seems to imply that we should be more conscious of what's going on. It's even perhaps a more intense day. How do those two things work together? And of course, the question is going to be, if Shabbos became Shabbos because Hashem rested on it, how does that make it holy? Which part of resting is holy? So Hashem rested on Shabbos, and that's how it became a holy day? Because Hashem rested, therefore it became holy? What's the link? What's the bridge between resting and becoming holy? That last question, I think, is probably the best question we've asked so far. How does Hashem resting on Shabbos make Shabbos into a holy day? Help me out. Come on, someone give me a suggestion.
Can't have holy without having the Shabbos, because they go together. And when Shabbos comes in, that holiness comes in, lighting candles, making kiddush, the Halakhas, a special meal. Everything has to do with everything. You wouldn't tell somebody non-Jewish that, but I mean, that's the whole thing, isn't it? It's a very holy time.
Correct.
And it's Shabbos. So you can't have one without the other, I don't think.
Absolutely right. And that's why we need both. We absolutely do need to both. We need to create the atmosphere, and the holistic whole experience creates the holiness and the relaxation that come together. But we're going one step earlier than Shabbos as we know it. In its developmental stage, as Shabbos became a holy day, we're asking, what made Shabbos holy? How did Shabbos become holy? We know Shabbos became a day of rest because Hashem rested on Shabbos. But what part of that made it holy? Is my question making sense?
It's making sense. I just can't think of a good answer.
Okay.
I don't know enough.
I think the answer is that the Kaddish Hashem made the Shabbos holy. So the answer is the rest didn't make it holy on its own. Hashem made it holy because he rested on it. But it just delays the question a bit. Why did Hashem make a day of rest into a day of holiness? What's the connection between those two things? Now, the question's a very good question, but it's even better question because Chassidus has a very good answer. And the answer to this question, Chassidus is going to take us and it's going to turn Shabbos into a useful, practical life message for the whole week, for every moment of the week, because Shabbos really is the day of where it's going to be like the Shabbos candles. It illuminates the home. Shabbos illuminates the week. And when we light up Shabbos, especially with the Shabbos candles, but in general, as we light up Shabbos and we turn Shabbos into that illuminating oasis in time, that brightness, warmth, and upliftedness of Shabbos spills over and gives us a whole different week. So when we look at Shabbos with this new set of glasses that Chassidus makes a big deal out of, it should give us the ability to be able to look at the rest of the week in the whole new elevated light, with the warmth, with the brightness that Shabbos can give. So that's what we're setting ourselves out to do, to take the Shabbos power that Hashem gifted us and teaches us in this week's Parsha, and make it work not just for Shabbos, but help us work through our week so we can be on fire, switched on, alert, connected, conscious, mindful the whole week and every moment of whatever it is that we're doing, because Shabbos is his, is ours. Shabbos is here and Shabbos belongs to us, and that's how we have the power to do it. So we're going to go through a couple of slides here, and then we'll do a bit more talking. Here is the pasuk that we say in Kiddush that we mentioned earlier. Hashem blessed the seventh day. And Hashem sanctified it. Hashem made it holy. Why did Hashem make it holy? Because by Shabbos Mikol Malachtai, on this Shabbos day, he rested from all his work. That Hashem worked hard to create. So why did Hashem sanctify and bless the seventh day? Because he rested on it from all his work. That's the reason why Hashem made it holy, because he rested. And of course, that ties into our question we had earlier. Here is an interesting Rashi on that pasuk. And on that pasuk, Rashi says, when Shabbos came in, and that's how Hashem completed his creation. In the terms of the way Rashi quotes it from Chazal, what was the world lacking after 6 days of creation? Answers the Chazal, Menucha, the world was missing rest. Bas Shabbos, Bas Menucha, along came Shabbos, along came rest. Kol Nigmar Malacha. With this, the work of creation was completed. And here the Sikha makes a very interesting observation, and that is, Bas Shabbos, Bas Menucha, that when the completion of creation, what was the final creative act with which Hashem turned creation into complete creation? The answer is by creating rest. When Hashem rested, that's how creation came into completion. That's very interesting, because rest is the opposite of creation. It's almost like Hashem had to go back into reverse, into the opposite of creation, and only then did creation become complete. And that's interesting. But that's quite clearly what Rashi is telling us. 6 days, this, that, the other, another thing, and that was incomplete. Only when we went backwards and we stopped creating did creation become complete. And that's interesting, but that's what Rashi is telling us, and that's an interesting observation, which will help us appreciate what it is that Shabbos did for creation and how it helps us understand why we're resting. So here's the questions we've done so far. What is the essence of Shabbos? Why did Hashem need to rest on the seventh day? And how does resting in Shabbos equal holiness? What's the connection between resting and holy? And that somehow made the world complete. I love this picture, by the way. It's great. Gives you a very Shabbos-tic picture of the world. The whole thing can go whatever. It's beautiful. Let's talk a little Chassidus, and then we'll jump into a couple more texts. What we're about to explore here is we're going to describe how Shabbos changes our life, how our life changes when it comes to Shabbos. And in order to do that, we're going to describe what the world looks like before Shabbos and how Shabbos helps that look better. If anyone has any questions at any time, please unmute, feel free. We're going to describe what Chassidus says is the greatest innovation chidush of creation. When Hashem created in 6 days, 7 days, he created all heaven and earth. Which part of that creation was the biggest change, the biggest creative idea? What was the most amazing part of creation according to Chassidus? Anyone want to suggest? The truth is, it's probably not one answer. There's probably different memorim, highlight different areas. But I'm looking for one area. Anyone want to suggest one area of creation that is like the most creative of creation? Anyone want to take a guess or suggestion?
Too scared.
There's no right or wrong answer. Your answer is good. I think the human being. Humans are quite creative.
Mm-hmm.
Water's quite creative. The fact that there's life. But according to Chassidus,
Night and day.
the biggest cog in the wheel, the most amazing part of creation is actually, in terms of Chassidus, tzimtzum. What's tzimtzum? So before we say what's tzimtzum, let's describe why Chassidus comes to this conclusion. The way Chassidus asks the question is Hashem infinite? Of course, the answer is yes. And in order to understand what that means, let's imagine that the ocean was infinite. If the ocean was infinite, that would mean that there's nowhere where the ocean is not, and there's nothing that isn't the ocean. The ocean would be everywhere. It would be in this room. It would be in your house. It'd be an infinite ocean would be everywhere. It wouldn't stop. It would be everything. And of course, we wouldn't be able to be here because we need to be able to breathe, or we'd be part of the ocean in order for an infinite ocean to exist. Of course, the ocean isn't infinite, and thankfully Hashem created dry land and we can live here. It's great. But Hashem is infinite. Hashem is everywhere. Hashem is everything. So there is nothing but Hashem, because Hashem actually is infinite. And if that's the case, us, Chassidus and the Mamarim ask the question, if Hashem is everything, do we really exist? Are we really here? Because if everything is Hashem, including me, including the table, including the computer, including everything, is only Hashem, so what am I? Am I? Do I even have any sort of existence? Is there Hashem and me, or is it just Hashem? And if it's just Hashem, do I really not exist? It's hard for me to swallow that. And of course, Chassidus says the answer to that question is tzimtzum. The answer to that question is, I don't know if you've ever been on the computer and sometimes they ask you to put in your login details. But you're on someone else's computer, and if you put it in here, it's going to bring up their details. So there's an option on your browser called the incognito mode, where it doesn't present everything about you to the web, to the internet. It hides who you are. Incognito. Hashem does that. Hashem puts himself into a space of where it doesn't look like it's Hashem. And it looks like it's not Hashem. And when it looks like it's not Hashem, he allows us to feel like, oh, Hashem's not here, I'm here. And my family's here. And the world around me is here. And everything I'm comfortable with is here. Because I don't see Hashem. Hashem doesn't look like he's around. And I do look like I'm around. That is the creation of Tzimtzum. And according to Chassidus, that was the greatest creative idea of the whole of creation. The fact that there's a very complex human mind and eye, the fact that there's a very sophisticated nature system that is just enormous of how it works, is nothing compared to the fact that it looks like it exists. Because the truth is, there is nothing but Hashem. If you were ever to try and hide yourself, and that nobody should see you, but you can't use anything around you to hide yourself. You can only hide yourself behind yourself. Doesn't work. That's why we have clothing, because we can't hide ourselves behind ourselves. That's why we have houses, because we hide behind the house. We cover ourselves, we conceal ourselves using other properties. But Hashem has nothing else. There is nothing but Hashem. So how did Hashem manage to hide from us? How does Hashem make it that we don't notice that it's Him? There are many human beings that are creations of Hashem that believe or think that there is no Eibishter. Hashem is so hidden that they convince themselves that there is no Eibishter. How can it be? How can it be that a human mind could imagine that its own creator doesn't exist? So if Hashem doesn't exist, how do we exist? But that's the nature of creation. That is the greatest change of Bria Ha'olam. This is one of Chassidus' big ideas. The fact that there is life is much less amazing than the fact that it looks like there is no life. It looks like it doesn't come from Hashem. The fact that Hashem is hidden from us is the greatest achievement of Bria Ha'olam. One of the cute things that we learn, and an easy way to remember it, is that the world is called Olam. Olam Hazeh, Olam Haba. Our world is our Olam. The word Olam, which means world, is actually from the same word as Ha'elim, hiding. When Hashem created the world, He created a hide and seek game. Hashem hid. But the most amazing thing is that Hashem had nothing to hide behind. Hashem had to create a hiding place where it looks like He's not there. So next time I look at myself in the mirror, next time I think honestly about myself, or better still, next time I open up a siddur and I talk to Hashem and I want to feel close to the Ribbono Shel Olam, I don't have to meditate about something abstract, far away, in a different reality, in a different planet or galaxy. I want to start thinking about who I really am, what I really am, what's going on, why does the world exist? And of course, the answer is because Hashem is allowing us to see things as if they are in existence, and Hashem is constantly making it happen this way. This is the enormous turn it over on its head realization that the creation of Hashem, the kindness of Hashem in creation, isn't that He allows it to be. It's that He allows Himself to hide behind creation so that we can think that He exists. This is one of the most amazing realizations we can have. Then one of the mashalim that Chassidus often uses to describe this is that when light is too bright, we see nothing. But when we hide some of that light, then we can see a lot. Here's the picture of someone driving a car. The sun's shining straight into his eyes. And of course, when the sun's shining in his eyes, is that light or dark? When the sun is shining in his eyes, it's very, very, very light. It's too light. And therefore, he can see nothing because it's too much light. When you hide that light, cover it with a veil, with a filter, with a visor, with the sunglasses, whatever else you wear. So now all of a sudden, because you've pushed away some light, you've hidden some of that light, that's how we're able to see something. And when we see something, that's when we're able to start to appreciate what the lesser light has allowed us to see about the greater light. Hashem's creation is the sunglasses. That's the innovation of creation. Why does this make a difference to us? It makes a big difference to us. Every time we think about, oh wow, Hashem created this. Oh wow, Hashem created that. The fact that we see the creation, the bigger innovation, the bigger wow factor isn't that we can see it because it's here. The wow factor is that Hashem has allowed us to enjoy it because He's put enough sunglasses on for us. That's what creation means. Creation means that Hashem has allowed little us, tiny specks of us, to appreciate His enormousness in a little tiny way. Wow, what a wonderful creator. What a special, caring, kind, Father in heaven. What a Rebbeinu Shalayla. What a Tayr Tat in Himmel. He's allowed us to appreciate at least a little bit the minuteness of his creation. How? By concealing more and more. This is how Chassidus explains the greatest part of creation. Why are we talking about this if we want to talk about Shabbos? Oh, so here's how it goes. Chassidus is going to say that when Hashem created creation, if you want to sum up what Hashem was really creating, Hashem was creating concealment. Or in the words of exact translation, tzimtzum is like, they call it contracting, or lessening, almost framing. Not diluting, but the filtering. That's what creation is. Now I ask you, when Hashem rested from creation, if Hashem's creation means to conceal, what does resting from creation mean? Again, creation means to conceal, to hide himself. What does resting from creation then mean?
To reveal himself.
Oh, exactly. Shabbos means that Hashem rested from hiding so much, and he let himself not be so hidden. If creation means to be hidden so that we have the glasses and we can appreciate the smallestness of creation, on Shabbos it says, you know what? Hashem says we can be a little less hidden, a bit more revealed. This is Shabbos. And this is how Chassidus understands Hashem didn't rest because he was tired. Hashem didn't rest from hard work. Hashem rested from concealing. Rested from concealing means he slowed down how much he's hiding himself. And when Hashem slowed down how much he's hiding himself, that's how he was able to allow himself to be more revealed. Interesting. The pasuk says, "Vayechal Elokim b'yom hashvi," and Hashem finished on the seventh day. Vayechal can also mean Hashem allowed it to be expired. Where's that quote gone here? This is an interesting one. Chassidus explains Tzimtzum, the reason why some creations have more life, or a higher form of life, and some creations have less, is down to how much Hashem has hidden himself in the rock. It's very minimal. Hashem is very hard to be seen in the rock. It doesn't move, but it's definitely there. Something created the rock is material, but compare that to a tree that shows much more sign of life. It grows and it's taller and it's stronger and it blossoms in the spring and it turns colors in the autumn and the fall. That's the greatest sign of life. It's less tzimtzum. But compare that to an animal that has lateral movement. It comes and it goes and they work in packs that's much more revealed Hashem. And then you compare animals to humans, it's even a higher form of life. But each of those higher forms of life is a greater revealing of Hashem's power, a little bit more. And of course, a malach, an angel, is an even higher form of life in a totally different reality, because that's even less tzimtzum there. And this is what we're learning here, that a person on Shabbos has even less tzimtzum. This is a quote from the Rebbe Rashab, Shalom Devber. It's a favorite name for me right now. He says the Shalom Devber in the Sefer Marim, Tavish Samach Vav, the Inyan HaManucha, the concept of divine rest, is to refrain from tzimtzum. And where do we see that in the pasuk? Says the Rebbe Rashab, as it is written, Elokim completed on the seventh day. Vayechal Elokim b'yom hashvi. Elokim is the name of Hashem that represents God's capacity of restraint and concealment. Midas Hadin, Hateva, Elokim. And on Shabbos, Elokim rested. The tzimtzum implied by the name Elokim not only rested, says the Rebbe Rashab, Yichal can also mean expired. Yichal meloshin kiloyon. Hashem rested from the act of tzimtzum, allowing the concealment to expire, to lessen, to fade away. Something similar occurs every week on Shabbos. On this day, Hashem rests from the act of concealment, and the divine light is revealed without the veil of tzimtzum, making us aware that we are standing before the King. This is a whole new idea of what Shabbos is. Shabbos means that there is greater availability. It's a greater window into the holiness, the godliness of creation. How are we doing? How is our new understanding of Shabbos settling? Any questions, any suggestions, any comments?
Is this why when Moshe was going with the people through the desert, Hashem then gave them double the mon every Shabbos so that they too could know that it was completely different and they had food there for themselves?
Yes, exactly. And that's also why we don't work on Shabbos. Why do we not go to work on Shabbos? Not because Hashem doesn't like work, but because during the week when it's concealed and it's very much creation, we've got to work. That's what Hashem created creation for. But when it comes to Shabbos and Hashem says, hold on, today we're doing step up, then we say, hold on, don't work today, because today we're stepping up. And when we're stepping up, we see Kedusha on a whole higher level. It's almost non-creational. It's higher than creation in a sense. And on Shabbos, therefore, it doesn't match to work and to go and cook food, or in the times of the mon, like you said, to go and collect the mon. Exactly. Very well said. You remind me of a story of the Ruzhina. The Ruzhina was one of the great, enormous Hasidic masters. When he was a young boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old. So his teacher was teaching him the Gemara that was talking about somebody who was traveling on Shabbos and got lost. He doesn't know which day of the week it is. When should you keep Shabbos? You don't have a clock, you don't have a WhatsApp, you don't have nothing. How do you keep Shabbos? You don't know which day is Shabbos. Could be today, could be yesterday, could be tomorrow. What do? Says the halacha, you start counting 7 days. You know you didn't set out on Shabbos, so yesterday's Sunday, today you set out on Sunday, and then you count 7 days. On the 7th day, you keep Shabbos. But every other day of the week, you do minimal malacha that you need. And then you keep the Shabbos on the 7th day until you come to civilization, at which point you'll readjust your calendar. And the young boy asks his teacher to explain it again. He doesn't get it. So his teacher tries to explain, he was in a caravan, and he got lost, and there was a sandstorm. Gives him a whole, and the kid just doesn't get it. Eventually the teacher's like, what's the problem? What don't you understand? He doesn't know when it's Shabbos. He's like, what's the big deal? Why don't you just look into the sky? You see, if it's a Shabbos, the sky, it's Shabbos. At 7 years old, the Ruzhina saw a different world on Shabbos. Literally in his physical eyes. Amazing. But these are tzaddikim. These are our righteous chachamim. But it happens to be in halacha, there are also halachic examples that show us that Shabbos is literally a physical change. One such halacha, this is the answers we just said, Hashem God's rest, the concealment that made creation possible. And this rest renders Shabbos a holy day and all creation is holier. Why does rest equal holy? Because if rest means that Hashem is more revealed, that's another word of saying holy. So Hashem's rest automatically equals a holy day. Because Hashem rested on that day, therefore he wants us to rest on that day. And what sort of rest does Hashem rest? Hashem rests from hiding, from concealing, from making it look less holy. So the rest is more holy. A day of rest means a day of open holiness. Of course, it's a holy day. But here are some examples of where the halacha tells us it's tangible, it's physical. It's not just something in the hocus pocus. It's not just something that your neshama knows about. It's not just something that the abstract tzaddikim know. This is something that we can learn. Here's one quote from the Gemara that talks about the neshama yiseir nitmoi ba'adam erev Shabbos. A yid has an additional soul. Learns from vayi nafesh, which is made up of 2 words, vayi nafesh, woe into the soul, that's just lost the second soul at the end of Shabbos. And in the halacha it tells us this is why we smell besamim at Havdalah. What's the meaning of smelling besamim by Havdalah? To revive the remaining soul for the loss of having the neshama yisera. What's the neshama yisera? The neshama is a connection point to Hashem. On Shabbos, we are more connected. And as Shabbos ends, that connection is lost. So the neshama that remains within us is feeling weak. You just lost such an open connection. And physically, we need to smelling salts or smelling spices to revive ourselves in the here and now. That's the halacha. And we do that practically. We make a bracha over the besamim to revive ourselves. And that's in the tangible here and now. Another interesting halacha, it comes to weddings, chasanas. The halacha is that it is an interesting quote from Rabbi Soloveitchik, from J.B. Soloveitchik, which he writes when he was growing up. He was in Parshah, and he goes to the Marshals Shtibel, and he saw this really worn out Yiddish poor people, but on Shabbos, you could literally see their face was a changed face. And it's so beautiful the way he writes it, how we will be able to see it. That's from just one of the examples. But there's another halachic example, and that is when it comes to a wedding, one of the mitzvahs are to do Sheva brachas. We have Sheva brachas, 7 brachas that we say for the chassan and kala whenever there's a minyan and we're sitting down to have a meal and the chassan and kala are present. And we do that in the first night, as in under the chuppah, and then again by the wedding meal. And then every time afterwards, you don't have to, but whenever there is a sit-down meal, the chassan, kala, and a minyan, then we do Sheva brachas, providing, says the Gemara, v'hu shabo panim chadashas. Only if a new face arrives. You only do the Sheva brachas if there's somebody present who hasn't been there on one of the previous celebrations of this chassan and kala. So if everybody was there at the wedding, or at least during the wedding or one of the previous Sheva brachas, and there's nobody new, you can't say the Sheva brachas, you can only say the 7th one, Asher. But if there's somebody new who wasn't at the wedding, or the host invites the neighbor and it doesn't really know the chassan and kala, and he's come to join in the celebration, then we say Sheva brachas again. And that's true, except for Shabbos. On Shabbos, you don't need to have a panim chadashas. You don't have to have anyone new. You can say the Sheva brachas even if nobody new is there. Why? Says the Tosfos, Shabbos a chashin and panim chadashas. Shabbos is a new face. So the Sikha asked the question, what, Shabbos is a face? Shabbos is a person? How did Shabbos make that you don't have to have anyone new? How does it increase the joy of the simcha? So there's different answers. But the Sikha says, what we just learned answers the question. What happens on Shabbos? On Shabbos, everybody changes. We as human beings, as physical people, as mundane, as materialistic people, are changed when it comes to Shabbos. Here it is. On Shabbos, there is no need for a new face, for a Jew's face is incomparably more radiant in Shabbos than during the week. Our radiance renews on Shabbos and confers us the status of a new face. I was at the wedding yesterday, but that wasn't Shabbos me. On Shabbos, I look different. You look different. We all look different. We don't need a new face. Everybody's a new face. Not that Shabbos is a new face, but on Shabbos, we are a new face. And this is in the halacha. The tailor in Mezribush would say that when he would sew clothing for the Baal Shem Tov, he would ask, is this clothing for the weekday or for Shabbos? Because if he would give the Baal Shem Tov weekday clothing on Shabbos, it would be too short on him. Physically too short. He would sew clothing taller for the Baal Shem Tov on Shabbos, because the Baal Shem Tov was physically taller. It reminds me of a funny story. It was one of the Bachrim who went on Mivtzayim. I think he was in Atlantic Avenue, somewhere in Brooklyn. And he wanted to make a shtender for the Rebbe as a gift. Maybe it was Shmas Tishim, the Rebbe's birthday. So this guy was a woodcraft person. So he asked him to make a shtender for him. He says, sure. So he says to him, how big is your Rebbe? And the Bach was an Israeli Bach. He didn't speak English that well. So he said to him, my Rebbe is the biggest Rebbe around. He's the biggest Jew around. Comes back to pick up the shtender, and the shtender is 6 foot tall. He made it for the biggest people around. That's the idea. But the Baal Shem Tov literally was bigger on Shabbos. Unbelievable. And what we're learning here is that we also have a physical change. So yeah, indeed, we light the candles and we create an atmosphere. But we actually have change in ourselves because on Shabbos, the world is more godly. Hashem rests from concealing himself on Shabbos. And on Shabbos, there is more godliness. And that is what rest means. We don't rest on Shabbos from work. On Shabbos, we rest from mundaneness, from materialism. That's what we're resting from. And therefore, even if it's harder work, there's no burden in it because it's full of life. It is life. It's godliness. Life is Hashem. And on Shabbos, there's more Hashem available. So we've now basically answered all 4 of the questions. These are the 2 examples of how we find it in Halacha, but equally we find the same sort of idea that we've learned here. First of all, it answers that Hashem rested, not because he was tired, but he rested from Tzimtzum. The second question we asked about, how does rest equal holy? And of course, the answer is rest isn't the opposite of holy. Resting from Tzimtzum, resting from ignoring Hashem, is because when Hashem is more revealed, that is holiness. And that also explains why we don't work on Shabbos. We don't switch on the light and we don't drive the car, even if it's harder work, but we call that rest. Not because it's less work, but because it's less materialistic. It's more in connection with Hashem. And therefore, even if it's hard work, it may be hard, but it's not burdensome. If someone was told, go and collect diamonds, they might be really heavy, but it's a pleasure to do it. Even if it's harder work. This is how a Hasidic approach to Shabbos looks like. The hard work isn't just worthy because it'll bring better family time. But the hard work is worthy because it's more godly, which is what we're all about on Shabbos. I want to end off with a quick story. Sami Rohr, Shalom, who was the founder of the Rohr Foundation, which sponsors and makes a lot of what we're learning here possible through his grants and everything. So he grew up in Europe. When he was in the refugee camp in Basel, so there was the Rav, Rabbi Shochet, Rabbi Yehuda Shochet was there, was the Rav, and he would work really hard all week. And on Shabbos, he was a practicing yid. He would go to shul, whatever it is, and the Rav would often push him to come to learn a bit on Shabbos because the whole week there was no time to learn. But in order to learn on Shabbos, he had to wake up. I think 7 o'clock in the morning. He had to be in shul after really working hard. So one time the Rav's pushing him, come to the shir. So he says to the Rav, Rabbi, I have 1 day a week that I can sleep in. There's 1 day a week I can sleep. You want me to come and learn? And the Rav says back to him, Tzaddik, you have 1 day a week that you can learn. You want to go to sleep? And he ends up the story by saying, and of course the rabbi won. And it's exactly the same thing. There's 1 day a week that we can learn, that we can connect, that we can relate. Let's not go to sleep. Let's make it special. And when we look at Shabbos that way, this is what the joy of Shabbos is. Not because we're doing nothing, but because we're less materialistic. We're more godly. We're more holy. This is who we are, and this is what's going on around us. Now, Shabbos is warm the whole week. It reminds us what we're doing. It reminds us why it's worth all the effort that we're putting in the whole week. Hashem should bench us. We should have a full Shabbos every Shabbos, and the Shabbos should spill over and uplift us for the whole week to keep us well focused and well motivated, that we should feel uplifted, whatever we're doing, whatever the week might bring us, with Toiv Anirah Vanigla. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask. I wish everyone a gebench tavach, Pesach, Sheni, Shtak, and Fanfalim, and a very, very lively and meaningful Lag BaOmer.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Most welcome.
Thank
Have a good
you.
week, everybody.
Thank you.
As always.
Mazel tov.
Thank you very much. Bruchim to you.
Very
Yes,
nice.
Shafar, thanks so much.
Kol tov.